Since the Taliban regained control of Afghanistan in 2021, some 200,000 Afghans, many who supported the U.S. war effort, have found refuge in the United States. Most were given humanitarian parole to stay in the country. But the Trump administration has ended those protections, and many now face deportation back to Afghanistan, where they fear Taliban retribution. One such case is highlighted by the Washington Post, John Woodrow Cox, and he joins us now for tonight's interview. So, John, just as a way to start, can you recount the case that you wrote about in the Post?
Sure. So the gentleman I wrote about, he came here in 2021. And preceding that, he had spent years supporting the U.S. war effort. He, as had his family. His brother was an interpreter for the U.S. Army. He had gone to the American University of Afghanistan, which is this, symbol of Western ideals. He had taught, computer skills to teenagers there. And then when the country collapsed in August of 2021, he and his wife boarded a military plane to Qatar. He was vetted along the way. He was vetted in Qatar. He was vetted at Dulles. He was vetted again at a military base. He applied for asylum in 2022. He had also applied for work authorization. So he'd gone through lots and lots of steps. All, as his lawyer described it, he did everything right. He followed every step. He followed every rule. He waited for his asylum claim to be processed for 3 years. He never received an answer. And then in July of this year, he was arrested by ICE, and he is now facing the prospect of deportation. And if he's deported, he believes that he'll be killed by the Taliban.
John, before you tell me what the grounds on which he was arrested, tell me briefly, what was his expectation? What promise did he expect that going through all of those, jumping all those hoops, what promise was he banking on?
Yeah, this idea that nobody would be left behind, which was very much what the American government had told their allies, their Afghan allies, many of whom are still there and have never gotten out. That was a thing that he reminded himself all the time. He was so frustrated with the process that he hired an attorney in March to say, hey, what is going on with my asylum claim? I've done everything right. I've waited for 3 years. Why hasn't it been approved?
And then on what grounds was he arrested?
So he says that when he was arrested, the ICE officers told him he was being arrested because his documentation had expired. And that wasn't true. I mean, his humanitarian parole was still valid to the end of August. He had a work authorization and a driver's license through the end of July. When we approached the Department of DHS, when we went to DHS and said, why was he arrested? They said that he was an illegal, unvetted alien. When I asked them why was he illegal, it was because they had canceled his humanitarian parole. So he was, in their view, he was made illegal because of the step they took to revoke his parole.
And as you mentioned, he had been thoroughly vetted multiple times. Is his fear about retribution if he's sent back to Afghanistan, is that founded?
Certainly the experts I talked to would say that it's founded. I talked to a former U.S. Marine who has worked for the past 4 years to get people out of Afghanistan. She knows of many cases in which Afghan allies have been killed. Just today, there was a report published that showed more than 100. These are soldiers who had fought in the war on behalf of the United States. They're Afghans. That report suggests that they'd been killed since 2023 by the Taliban. So there is considerable evidence. The UN just this month published a report about the crimes against humanity that have been perpetrated by the Taliban.
We have about 20 seconds, John. His family, you're not mentioning his name, of course, so he doesn't get retribution, but what happens to his family?
That's an open question. He has 2 children who are both U.S. citizens. They're quite young. His wife, her case would very much depend on what happens to him. But he says he was told by an FBI agent that if he was sent back, in a worst case scenario, they would send his children and his wife as well.